station.
Calling all Wolves fans, you can join us for a Michelob Ultra watch party January 20th at Wild Bill's in Apple Valley. KFAN's Max Fuller will be there from 7 to 9. You can play trivia, win prizes, enjoy drink specials, hang out with Max. Full details, KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
Well, not exactly, I believe, the news that the Minnesota Wild were all that interested in celebrating. But your guy, the team's leading scorer, Matt Boldy, lost for the road trip. With the Wild about to begin a 3-game road trip, and Boldy has been placed as of today on injured reserve. It's described as a lower body injury. So he's got to miss at least the upcoming 3-game trip to Buffalo. Russo Radio reminds us that the Sabres have won 15 of 17. Toronto and Montreal. Boldy will also be forced to miss the team's first game back home against the Red Wings next Thursday. There does seem to be some question as to when exactly he got hurt. Played more than 19 minutes in our not exactly inspired 6-2 loss to Winnipeg last night. He had an assist in that game, but he is out. The Wild also placed your guy, Eriksson Ek, on injured reserve with a lower body injury. That's retroactive to last Thursday, so he can come off anytime he's ready to return. Eriksson Ek has missed 3 games, team 0-2-1 in that stretch. The club has lost 5 of their last 6 games, 1, 3, and 2. So I'm not calling it crisis, but I am saying that after what seemed to be a real surge, giving belief to the notion that the Wild are going to make some noise in the playoffs finally. They are going to get out of the first round this year. We go back to a tender, more vulnerable place that indicates not the end of the season, but certainly trouble compared to what we had before. And now you have injury added to insult, correct?
Some big knockers out there.
That's correct.
Including Brodin, who might miss the Olympics because he's in the meat grinder.
Yeah, you're right.
So, but this is why you build the big bank of points, right?
It does help.
To help weather the inevitable injury storms that I'm sure affect every team at some point. I think Winnipeg even had some injuries last night, but the Wild, it seems like when they get one, they get a couple, and it just compounds and compounds and compounds. Earlier in the season, it felt like that was happening, so that's a buzzkill. The Boldy one is interesting because, as Russo said, nobody knows when it happened, or at least we haven't figured it out yet.
Or they're not saying. Boldy and Eriksson Ek are expected to be available for the Winter Games next month, at least according to a Russo team source. Of course, Eriksson Ek will represent Sweden, Boldy the U.S. Your guy, Bogosian, also remains on injured reserve, lower body injury. He has missed 5 games. Our kid goalie, who's been one of the emerging stories this year, awful yesterday, and then got pulled right after 2 periods.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken.
They went back to the
Which
bus.
is not unprecedented.
No.
But it certainly can happen over a period of time. So none of that's encouraging news. It's not, season ending kind of stuff. And it looks like right off the bat we're playing a very good, a very hot team at the very least. So you do what you do. I mean, ultimately you have to find a way to dig deep and figure something out so that a mini slump doesn't start looking like a full-fledged slump that will, quite frankly, reintroduce the doubts that a lot of people had at this team about this team when we started the season struggling to the degree that we had. Because the momentum has been so great lately, they're going to have to make one other move, right? Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to. I mean, they're good enough now to compete. They've already proven that. Therefore, you can't worry about another draft pick or you can't worry about mortgaging some of the future. You got to add one more piece to give you the best chance to make a move now. So things can change. We just talked about it at the first segment. The regular season is long, and this is another example of not being sure how worried to become over a stretch of games in which we don't look particularly good. Kaprizov certainly hasn't looked like his old self offensively. So I don't know. We'll know where, so in a sense, I've already violated my vow, although I didn't really vow. What I said was I wanted us to consider the idea of not talking about any more regular season basketball or hockey because of how booby-trapped the whole conversation tends to be when we pretend that the world is coming to an end, or we pretend that it's all inevitable that we're going to raise a banner. So maybe we'll think about that over the weekend. You mentioned it's going to be hard to do that given Thursday we're supposed to do from Target Center before the Bulls game, a program. So it'll be kind of hard to not talk about that then. So maybe we just get a little bit selective about it. I'm not sure. Now, you could argue that talking about an injury is legit because that's not necessarily evaluating what the team has been up to. It has more to do with the factual notion that a particular important player is just not available.
10 games before the Olympic break. You've been asking me, when do they go? When does Guerin go? And one of the players said it last night. Basically, we got 10 games or so before we all take the break, and February 4th is the last game. They're on the road at Nashville. But that'll be a fun night. I bet they stay over and play the game in Nash Vegas, then hang out there on Broadway.
Why wouldn't you?
Everybody goes to the Olympics or goes back home. But so we'll see what they do in these next 10.
Why wouldn't we consider the Larry Mondello guy's suggestion for the picks next week? Maybe we just do the picks with Mark Gerbschmidt and don't even bother with Carl, as sensitive as he is, and as really stifling as the segment becomes, because anytime we get into anything that this might be a little bit pithy or snarky, he basically replays the tape of his brother saying this is what he won't be a part of.
The problem with that, I think, is didn't Mark seem a little dry? Yeah, I don't think that was very entertaining.
No, but on the other hand, Carl was pretty dry.
He was, but there's always potential.
Well, that's true.
With Gerby.
Yeah, you might be
right. And the thing with
that.
Gerby is you never know. Like, they could fire Matt LaFleur and somehow hire John Harbaugh away from the Giants by next week, and then all of a sudden Gerby's back to the usual antagonistic Carl Gerbschmidt. Things can change quickly in Gerby world. It's kind of like we're talking about with sports.
This is with sports. Yeah, that's exactly true. I guess that's a fair point.
Give away some money?
Might as well.
Fan wants to give you a shot to win bonus bucks. It is our national cash contest. 4 o'clock keyword is bonus. Go to KFAN.com and enter the keyword bonus.
Our Russian players are bumbling. The St. Paul wall is crumbling. This franchise is always fumbling. Dallas Stars in 5.
Wow. That's rough.
Wow.
They say we're tough.
Clayton from Rochester. Miami is full of Indiana red. Do you think Harbaugh hogged the bed?
Like Lavell's brother?
The Sheik's mud pit rumors are no longer dead. Wolves in 5. I'm sorry, Clayton, I mangled the delivery there. That's really well done.
That's a good synopsis of the week.
It is. Miami is full of Indiana red. Do you think Harbaugh hogged the bed? The Sheik's mud pit rumors are no longer dead. Wolves in 5. That's really, really good. That's outstanding. Couple of news items. The President of the United States, now update me if there's another change on this because it changes hourly, seemed to soften, at least for the moment, his threat about sending in the troops via the Insurrection Act. Today, he said, and I don't know where this was, if this was an oppressor or if this was when he was accepting the Nobel Peace Prize that he didn't win. I don't think there's any reason right now to use it. But if I needed it, I'd use it. Now, there was a headline I didn't find any detail on this indicating that the governor's office was in communication with the White House. Does that mean maybe they took up Arnie Carlson's idea about some direct conversation? I don't know. Because I can't find, beyond that vague headline, I can't find any detail about it. Somebody might be able to help me in that regard via the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line at 646-86.
Star Tribune had that headline. Just clicked on the story here quickly.
I can't find any detail from the story. Can you?
Really, the only detail is Governor Walz told the Trump administration to end this occupation during a live address earlier this week, and his office said it's in touch with the White House.
Okay. But that's pretty vague, so we don't know what exactly that might mean. But I thought that was at least worthy of some conversation. Now, is it possible the president is distracted as he continues to build the plans to invade Greenland? I don't know. By the way, did you see? Let me see if I can find it here. I had it somewhere. Are you familiar with Mitch McConnell?
Yeah.
U.S. Senator?
Yeah, long time.
Long-time Senator. I believe a Republican.
Yes.
Pretty sure. Will you look that up? Yeah. But I think he's a Republican.
Yes, had to think about it, but he is.
Mitch McConnell, either yesterday or the day before. Close ties with our northernmost allies are what make America's extensive reach in the Arctic actually possible. And I have yet to hear from this administration a single thing we need from Greenland that this sovereign people is not already willing to grant us. Until the president can demonstrate otherwise, then the proposition at hand today is very straightforward. Incinerating the hard-won trust of loyal allies in exchange for no meaningful change in U.S. access to the Arctic. That's a tried and true Republican asking what needs to be asked. This falls under the classification. We got into some of this on Enough Said tonight, where you just every once in a while shake your head and go, we might do what? And we have to explain why we want to do what? Invade Greenland? It's just so absurd. It should be even absurd to the Trumpers, but I guess once you start down the path, I guess there's just no end to it. But there are a number of Republicans, again, who've said on this one, what are we doing? What are we doing? What kind of message is this sending? Other than we can just flex whenever we want to? Isn't that what we oppose when other people do it? But I digress. One pop culture item, not political in nature, I don't believe. And I meant to get to this yesterday, and unfortunately I didn't. But I can't not discuss it, I guess is the best way to put it. Yesterday, yesterday was the 15th, correct?
Yep.
On Jan 15, 1981, a new television show, back in the days when network TV mattered, premiered, and it was called Hill Street Blues. And I bring it up not because everybody can relate to it, given how far back it goes, but I would say to you that if you've ever enjoyed any of what now seems to be an endless series of TV police-related procedurals or dramas or whatever, you can make the argument that they all come from that show, which when it was released was different than almost any other cop show that had ever been offered up on television, because it was more than a one Adam 12, right? Which was, all right, we're just going to solve crimes. It was the human toll of law enforcement. It was trying to, I guess, debate procedures sometimes used by the police when police may have crossed the line a bit. The cast was legendary, and it included a guy you had, I think, in this very studio, Ed Marinero, the former football player.
Absolutely. Yep.
It ran from 81 to 87. And in 81, it won 8 Emmy Awards. That's only been surpassed once by West Wing in 2000. That's how influential and successful and celebrated that show was. It ended up winning between May of 87, I should say January of 81 and May of 87, 146 episodes, 26 Emmy Awards, 98 Emmy Award nominations. And it was a classic ensemble cast. By the way, it included a former UCLA basketball player named Michael Warren as well. Daniel J. Travanti, Veronica Hamill, Michael Conrad, and a slew of very effective ensemble members, including Dennis Franz as well. And the thing that always, to me, the signature of that program, the thing that made it so good at humanizing the cop experience, again, without always romanticizing the cop conduct, was each episode would generally begin, at least in the early years, with roll call. And it would be the morning deal where, okay, Jones and Pazinski, you're taking care of this murder investigation or this bunco squad story, whatever the case may be. And then they all start getting up like they're going to starting their day. And the sergeant, Phil Esterhaus, stopped them. Whoa. Let's be careful out there. Became like this mantra, which of course said everything. You might not come home alive by the end. Let's be careful out there. Said it pretty much every time. And by the way, once he passed away in real life, then I believe the tradition was continued by Sergeant Lucy Bates through the end of season 4, basically saying the same thing. So for those who can remember it, I assume they celebrate it, I hope, the same way we did. But what you got to see today, it's hard to relate because there's so many options today. But what you have to remember then is there weren't that many. You just got the 3 networks, maybe a couple of independent things. And so when something hit, it felt big because in this case, as I said, there really had not been a show quite like it before. And because there weren't all that many others. So it stood out on its own. A million shows, I think, to varying degrees, have been inspired by what that show attempted to establish. Hill Street Blues. And I don't even know, I assume you can get it. I don't even know if it's, available somewhere. Maybe it would be a little dated at this point. I'm not sure because I haven't seen it forever. It's probably too old for you, right? Hill Street Blues?
It is. I had to do a crash course when Marinero came in studio. I think you were supposed to do it.
I was disappointed because although you said it was kind of pear-shaped because it was hard kind of reining Ed in a little bit.
Ed liked Ed.
He wouldn't stop talking.
Well, though, there was the draft when he wouldn't stop talking, if you remember that.
That's right.
Which was like a week later.
That's right.
Might have been even the same week. But then it made the appearance with me even funnier, I thought.
Yes.
Because you could see that coming. You could see that Ed was going to take his moment. Even in the 45 minutes or the hour that he spent in that studio talking about Hill Street. And he had another show later where he was a football coach that had kind of a cult following.
Yes.
So we talked about that, but it was fine.
Yes.
It was interesting, but he liked himself some Ed for sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess he was an all-time great player.
Yeah.
And then he ended up being a pretty effective actor for that period of time as well. And that was the show in which he was among many. That was the other thing. That was one of the first ensemble shows. It was an endless number of people that all got put into it, and it worked just brilliantly for a number, I think, as I said, about 6 years. Premiering yesterday, January 15, in the year 1981. Bottom of the hour pause. Ben Goessling. We get caught up on NBA. No, not Stanley Cup either. WNBA. No, not that. How about NFL playoffs? and whatever leftover thoughts he has on your favorite football team, the Minnesota Vikings. Stay tuned. Questions for Ben Goessling, or Gosling, I think, or is it Goessling? Whatever way Carl Gerbschmidt has mispronounced his last name. Hit the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line to chat with us and him. 646-86. That's 646-86.
The 4-2 Ben Goessling from the pick segment last week.
He did very well.
Tied for second.
Tied for second place. Did extremely well last week. Maybe that's where we start. We start with the playoffs. How many of these games are on the fan? Do we know?
Most of them. There's a wild game tomorrow that will cut into the first game.
Yeah.
That was the Denver and Buffalo game.
Okay.
So the second game will be on. In between, then we've got Wolves. But on Sunday, both of them are on.
Both are on.
Yep.
Of them on.
It'll be on the Plus, if not the Fan.
That's the beauty of it. You will be covered via the free iHeart Radio app. I look at, in anticipation, we talked about this last week, but now we can talk about not what we anticipated for the wild card round, but what took place. And historically, Ben, as you well know, most people say, well, this is the week they like the best, because the assumption is the first week there could be some mismatches, some games that you don't even have to bother watching, and that this is the week where the cream will rise to the top. You'll have the best teams. But what's remarkable this year is you only had one game that you could say was kind of a snoozer. The last one, New England, hosting the Chargers, but that was a one-score game to the fourth quarter, even if there was not, a lot of offense in that game. So I'm fully looking forward to these matchups going in, Ben, all four of them. I like these games.
Yeah, I agree. And really last weekend, I think certainly delivered to expectations. I mean, those early games, you're always kind of like, is there a team that doesn't belong here? Are these going to be lopsided? But the thing about the divisional playoffs that I think is fun is you still have the volume of games. I mean, when it gets down to 2, it's a little bit less, and there's a little less to look forward to. But the fact that it's still 2 days of it, and then you have these teams that are at their peak, they've either won a game or had a bye to get to this point. So, you kind of have the quality and quantity match up. But yeah, last weekend was a lot of fun with all of those coming down to the end until that last one, like you said. So yeah, so far, I mean, the NFL wants close games to the point where they set out those statistics every week about how many games were one-score games, and they certainly like that being part of their brand. And I think whether parity or rules, I think it's all engineered to produce a lot of these games where they come right down to the end. So I would expect more of that this weekend, and I think this set of playoff teams has been pretty wide open. So yeah, this weekend is it's one of my favorites of the year football wise, and I think it will be certainly a lot of good viewing this weekend.
Well, a couple of examples here of how I think unique this is this time around. Buffalo is on the road this year. They are slight underdogs to Denver, but it certainly looks like it should be a hell of a game, given Denver hasn't been here before, right, with this group, and Buffalo's got a lot of pedigree. The Bears are on this improbable ascension via the comeback, historic comebacks, and yet they're at home again in the frigidity of Chicago, 4.5-point underdogs in this game, which again speaks to a belief in Matthew Stafford a little bit and the Rams being a little bit more solid. So you have, I think you have, in both those cases, you have home teams that are considered a little bit, maybe suspect, but that aren't in a position where it's an easy game for either one of them, and good chances for road teams to be successful. I want to play off a little bit, riff on the Mark Craig piece that's available at StarTribune.com that tries, I think, hard to say, as much as we get fixated with the quarterback position, let's really take a long, hard look at several of these teams and their run to this point. He was speaking most notably about the number one seeds, right? Seattle on the NFC side, Denver, the AFC side. They both have recognizable quarterback names, especially Sam Darnold, who played creditably, certainly through much of the season. But in Craig's theory, Seattle is really, more than anything else, about great defense, and Denver, most assuredly, is about great defense as well. And that's where it gets tricky, right, about all these declarations of, well, better have a quarterback. Well, I think we all agree, all things being equal, you need a quarterback. But every once in a while, teams come around that remind us that if you can have an exemplary defense, you might be able to get away with something less than a superstar at the quarterback position.
I agree, and I think we have seen a lot of that shift happen across the NFL over the last couple of years, where you have seen teams start to have an answer to a lot of the offensive explosion that had happened, where it was, you had all of these teams throwing the ball vertically and getting big chunk plays, and the change kind of happened in a couple different fashions. It was a lot of the Vic Fangio stuff where people said, we're going to keep two safeties over the top, and you're not going to throw the ball downfield on us. You're going to have to be patient and try to not make mistakes and go 8-10 yards at a time. And then you've had, the Brian Flores type approach to this, where it's, we're going to play some of that stuff, but also we're going to come at you so fast that you can't get the ball downfield, because if you try to hold it that long, you're going to be on your back. So there has been this shift over the last few years. The scoring has been, it's been down a little bit, I think, and you have teams that probably have come up with answers that offenses maybe haven't adjusted to quite yet. So you do have these teams like the Broncos and like the Seahawks that are getting there in part because they bring a lot of chaos on defense. I mean, with the Seahawks, it's been that front. The Vikings certainly had a lot of trouble with it when they went out there, and the Broncos will throw a lot of different things at you as well in terms of that front seven. So you have had, I think, teams come up with some kind of innovations and innovative solutions to what we've seen offenses do. And it kind of goes in this pendulum, and I'm sure we'll see offenses shift back here at some point as well. But when you have, I think part of it is when you have young quarterbacks sometimes and young offensive linemen that are playing a game in college that maybe doesn't prepare them for how things are played in the NFL, that adjustment is really tough. And, we've talked a lot this year about quarterbacks reading coverage and how much coverage you need to read and all the pure progression stuff. A lot of this gets tricky when you have teams that are able to do like what you'll see the Seahawks do sometimes, and what you'll probably see the Broncos do as well, where the picture a quarterback has is not necessarily going to hold up when he gets to the top of his drop, and then he has to adjust. So I think when you have defenses built like these teams have them, you make yourself more competitive. It's not something where you have to be the first one to 35 points. I think there is a little bit of this shift, and certainly the Seahawks and Broncos have been big beneficiaries of that, and probably two of the leaders in that sense as well.
No question. And, I think we're all trying to figure out, well, what does this make it less likely that Brian Flores will return here to run this defense, that owners and general managers who are, we've got one filled position, that of the Giants head coaching job, John Harbaugh, that's still a lot of openings. And you say, all right, are you looking, it's the ongoing question, are you looking for an offensive, like a quarterback whisperer, or if you're looking for somebody, if you really don't think you have much of a chance to get greatness at the quarterback position, a guy who can fashion a really solid defense that, can kind of stand the test of time, that can be sustained, and that can give you a little bit of cover when it comes to who you have at the quarterback position. Do you think any of that will have any impact on whether, B-Flow is less or more likely to be back with the Vikings as defensive coordinator? Leaving aside, I'm not talking about going to a coordinator job someplace else. Yeah. I'm talking about his chances to be a head coach.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly, I think, will get him in the room. I think you're going to have a lot of teams that want to hear about the way he's gone about things the last few years, because it has been very innovative. There has not been anybody that's taken the types of schemes with the blitzes and pairing all of the zone coverages behind it quite the way that he's done it. So I would imagine that you're going to have more teams like the Ravens and the Steelers, and maybe a couple more, that just want to sit down with him and use it at least as an excuse to pick his brain and possibly see if it's a good fit. I think The thing you have to figure out with him, whether or not he is the scheme can be incredibly beneficial, but you do have to have an idea if he's going to be your head coach of how he will approach the quarterback position. It's got to be somebody he's bringing with him to call plays. Obviously, you have to have a plan for how he's going to connect with the quarterback, because the Tua Tagovailoa questions are going to come up, and the idea of how he relates to players is going to come up. I mean, all of those things, when you're looking for a head coach, have to be part of it, even if your expertise is not on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, we certainly saw it with Mike Zimmer when he was here. The lack of connection he had with his highly paid quarterback was a big storyline for a long time, and probably had a big impact on that team hitting a ceiling. So I think his approach and the way he's gone about it defensively has been innovative enough and successful enough that he's going to get looks. The overall question of what kind of a CEO is he going to be, what kind of a forward-facing figure, connecting with departments across the building, all of those things come into it, and the quarterback piece has to come into it in that regard, because you have to have that connection with your quarterback for it to work. Even if you are a team that's kind of defense first and defense forward, I think you have to have some ideas, especially if you're going to a team that, needs a young quarterback and has to have a plan going forward at that position. I imagine he's going to spend a lot of his time in these interviews talking about his ideas there. Yeah,
no question. Ben Goessling, brought to you by Standard Heating and Air Conditioning, as we prepare for the divisional round of the National Football League playoffs. And we look back, I guess, yet again on your favorite football team, the Minnesota Vikings. I want to get to a text to get your reaction to it, because I don't know that I heard this particular mixed message, but this is what Mike out of New Richmond writes. Curious on Ben's take on Kwesi sending out mixed messages. Before the year, he said the Vikings were interested in winning games in many different ways. This week, he said they had to get back to playing KOC style. So does this show KOC isn't capable of adjusting and doing what he originally said, doing whatever it takes to win? KOC looked pained each time he had to alter his kick-ass offense. Did you get the same message from Kwesi when he spoke along with KOC, or what do you make of that text?
It is interesting. My ears did perk up when he talked about getting back to the explosive style that we've played and we've had a lot of success with. I think they want that to be a bigger part of the offense, and I certainly think that Kevin O'Connell wants that to be the way they play. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I don't think he probably enjoyed having to change that as much as they did this year. So I think they want that to be a bigger piece of what they do. And I think, when they're talking about winning different types of fights, obviously they're talking about being able to run the ball and play in more low-scoring games. And certainly defensively, they're set up to do that. I think some of the emphasis on running the ball was partially what they wanted to do when teams are keeping more safeties back. I think that will continue to be part of it. But you also have to have a passing game that is a big component of that. So I think it's this mix of the base of what O'Connell wants to do was not there, and the counterpunch, so to speak, was there, but it probably could continue to get better. I did notice that, and I think it's certainly wise to assume that if the general manager is bringing that up, it's been a topic of conversation behind closed doors about how they need to get more of that back in their offense. I don't know that it'll be exclusively that, but yeah. I do think that part of their identity was missing this year, and the fact that he said it the way he did, it's worth keeping that in mind as we go through the offseason.
So I think one of the ongoing questions is how ambitious the Vikings can be regarding whatever quarterback presence they bring into the room. How far do you believe privately, forget publicly, privately they will be willing to go when it comes to the question of literally competing for a wide open starting quarterback berth?
I think cash in the free agency market is one thing, and the free agency market is not all that attractive. I mean, you've got Malik Willis, you've got Daniel Jones, whether he's healthy or not. You've got guys like Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, those are some of the names that are going to come up. Trades are a different story. I mean, if you were going to look at somebody that's been around the block a little bit, or if you say Joe Burrow is available, is that something they take a swing at? I think they will be open-minded enough about this that if there's a shoot-the-moon chance out there, I wouldn't rule that out. I say that with the acknowledgement that that can cost money, that can cost resources. Having a highly paid quarterback at the same time you have a highly paid receiver can be a tough thing to figure out financially. And they've got a lot of questions to answer financially this offseason anyway, with a lot of veteran players that have a lot of cap space occupied for next year. But I think if they found something like that and they felt like this could be the person that helps us make a deep run, I wouldn't rule that out. I don't think they've given up on McCarthy, but I think they are going to be open-minded enough about this that if they find themselves with a chance to pull the trigger on something like that, I don't think they're going to, just kind of swear that off and say that's not something we're going to consider at all. I would not be surprised if they went into this with an ambitious mindset.
Do they, here's what's, I'm curious, as someone who was there, I wasn't in the presser start to finish. I listened to a lot of it, and I think I'm in the minority because I came away not all that impressed with their declaration that was accepted as we're bringing in competition. I still thought it was so equivocating in their words, and everybody can use a better quarterback room, a deeper quarterback room, which you could say that no matter what your intention is as a starting position. And I know I'm unrealistic in what I was hoping for, but I kind of almost wanted him to step out of character, KOC, and go a little further and say, hey, look, we believe in this kid. We have believed in this kid, but he's got to get better in a number of areas here in a way that I can't, in fairness to the rest of my team, I have to, kind of put all things on the table here. And even like a sanitized version, a nicer version of what I said, I didn't get much of that from him. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, he did not go that far. I actually thought Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was probably a little more direct in some of the things that he said, or at least a little more declarative. But I also think the thing that Kevin O'Connell said about the way we talk internally may not be the exact way that I operate up at this podium. I do think he's seen a little bit this year that being as direct perhaps as he's been in the past doesn't always serve him very well, especially at this point. So I would not be surprised if the equivocation that we saw at the podium is different than how they're talking about this internally. And I think it's very possible that they'll say, well, we can develop McCarthy and go forward with that. But I don't think they'll rule anything else out, just because you're not going to know about him until you get back into game action. I mean, we've seen this, whether it's preseason games or training camp. There is a difference when you get into the real thing and everything is faster and everything's more complex, and you have to be able to operate and live in that world. And they're not going to know that until the start of the season. And I think when you still have a veteran team, there is going to be a little bit of a nudge toward getting somebody in here that can compete with a higher level of certainty than they had. I mean, I think it's one thing to have him as the first-year starter and say, okay, we think this can work, and we'll, kind of give it the try and see if everything else around him can help support him. I think it's another thing to go back into it in year two, seeing what they saw and say, we're going to put all of our eggs in that basket again. Doesn't mean he won't be the starter, but like I say, I think they will go into this offseason with an idea that if something comes along that they find attractive, there's no reason to kind of shut that off. So just conversations I've had around this make me think the approach to this could be a little more in a different lane, perhaps, than what we heard him say at the podium on Tuesday.
Fair enough. The Cousins name has come up, and it's not one I think that inspires a lot of Vikings fans because of a feeling of, okay, we've kind of been there, done that. But I don't know that it can be ruled out among the realistic possibilities. I have no idea what his expectations are, what other options he's going to have. I don't know. But he may end up being in the mix, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible. And, you have to figure out, okay, he's going to be 38 years old in August. How healthy is he? I mean, he played well at the end of the season. How far can you realistically go if he's back in charge? But he knows the offense better than anybody. It certainly has the relationship with Kevin O'Connell that they would want. And it's the weird part about it is he would basically be coming back to do the thing that led him to leave a couple of years ago when they said, we want to draft your replacement and have you come in. But I guess the piece of this that is different is, and I thought it was interesting when Kwesi Adofo-Mensah talked about this, I asked him about it the other day, that the messaging they're going to send to veteran quarterbacks may look different than what they did last year. I mean, Kirk Cousins left because they said we're going to draft the replacement. Daniel Jones left in part because they said, yeah, we want to see the kid play. I wonder if they will sell this job differently to veteran players than they did. And veteran players are certainly going to size it up and say, how realistic is my chance to win this job? Right. Or how much is it just, I'm going to probably end up holding a clipboard? I think a lot of the assessments that come from those veteran players will be on that basis. And Kwesi said it's a lot of what the conversations are about. So if Kirk Cousins felt like, well, okay, there's a lot of familiarity here. I know the receivers I'd be throwing to. I know the offensive linemen. I've had a lot of success with Justin Jefferson. I know the offense. I'm close with the coach, all of those things. I don't think he would look at it and say, well, I'm not going to be guaranteed the starting job, so I'm going to, cross this off my list. I think there was an interest in it last year, and I certainly think it's not a name I would cross off the list. I know people are going to have different reactions to that, but it's at this point not a name I would say there's no chance of that happening.
Yeah, I mean, the name, a couple texters have mentioned again, Malik Willis. I would be interested in pursuing him, I think, as an option, but I tend to think the way this league is set up now, there's going to be a team or two that is willing to flat out project him as their starter. They're going to make that leap, in which case I think it's more likely he'd be willing to go to that place where there's no question. We're bringing you in to be the number one quarterback, and I think as long as JJ is still here and he's still relatively young, there's no reason for the Vikings to give up on him yet, certainly.
Right.
And but if you have options, you're going to kind of maybe move away from here for that very reason, don't you think? If you have other possibilities where it's more obvious or likely that you're going to be the starter, you may think deep down, well, they may tell me I can compete for the job, but they really want JJ to be the guy.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I mean, every quarterback that you encounter, you're going to have probably a different conversation in terms of how much you're promising them. And I think, that conversation probably looks different for a guy that has more experience or more pedigree than Malik Willis does. I think you're probably, in his case, still looking at something where you'd want to have a few more assurances that there's not other competition in the building, because I don't know that he's going to walk in and have somebody say, even if we have another option that we've drafted highly, you are 100% the guy. I mean, I think, every team is going to come to a different conclusion on that, and there's probably a little bit of a sliding scale that gets applied to this. But, yeah, I think for him, this would be it'd be an attractive fit for a lot of the obvious reasons that you're throwing to Justin Jefferson.
True.
You're playing in a familiar offense that's very similar to what Matt LaFleur runs and all of those things. But the calculus about, am I going to be the starter, absolutely will play into it for him, as it will for a lot of these guys. And I think the answer to that question, that would come down to a conversation with the Vikings, but I think a lot of it will hinge on that, because this is his chance to kind of reboot his career and get paid and maybe be that next quarterback that needed to kind of flame out the one place and go back somewhere else and restart things and get another chance. So, yeah, I think as he looks at this as a big opportunity for him, I think his opportunity in each team is going to have a lot to do with where he signs.
Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll chat next week.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Dan.
Ben Goessling, Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. Fine sponsor of the Goessling segments all season long. We expect to visit with Lavelle or Scooter E. Neal III at 5:30. More on that later. Top 5 at 5 is coming up.
Previewing a Wolves game in Houston, gun belt tight, and reviewing a debacle of a Wild loss and more injuries to discuss.